SME has taken me to places I never thought I would go. Starting a career with Dynamite, you could also say I've been very confused about where I want to be. And the exciting thing is that I'm still as confused about where I want to be tomorrow. And I will talk a little bit about that. Before I do that, I thought, I've had a long day, I don't know about you guys, so I'm going to put you to a little work before we even get to that. It's only for projector, it doesn't move. Okay. I need to shuffle back and carefully a little bit. Okay, what I'm going to do is try to present a very short case to you. Try and give international trading, international economical terms, the supply side and demand side of the story, and then I will put you into a few groups. You can discuss that story yourself. I'd like one person from each group to be representing the group and talk about what you discussed. We discuss your response a little bit, and then we try and understand the learning outcomes from that approach. So hopefully you will like the structure. What is the case? The case is there is an SME, a small and medium enterprise. All over the world, we talk about international economics, the definition of small and medium enterprise is really. I know in Germany it's to do with the number of people that you employ. In China it used to be with the turnover. In India it used to be very, very fluid. Nobody really had an angle until we had the SME Act, as for which it's now defined by the plant and machinery, the amount of investments you make in the plant and machinery. So different countries follow different things. And it really is very fuzzy. It's not from a semantics or a definition perspective, but it's important to understand what we mean by an SME. And I think when we started with 40 people, we were SME. With 500 people today, I still think of an SME. I think it's more to do with the mindset than to do with the definitions around it. This SME has been 2 decades in this business and is now being led by the second generation of entrepreneurship. It's a business which is very capital intensive. Typically, the turnover to capital employed ratios are 1:1, and that's typical of most components. Unlike a product, where obviously from 1:10, if you make a television, you put 100 crores in the ground, you can do 1,000 crore, 2,000 crore business. In components, you cannot do that. It's a very skill-intensive business because you need a special kind of people. You need to hold on to those people once you train them, and hence the kind of attrition that you see in the BPO industry or activity turnover business. And it's of course a highly competitive business. For various reasons, but more importantly, because in 2005, the import duty on all electronic components in India was paid 0 under the WTO agreement. The first agreement called the ITA 1, the Information Technology Agreement 1, which means that if you want to do business, you want to manufacture still in India, you must be competitive with the rest of the world, including Korea and China or Japan. Electronics is not an easy business, as some of you may know. It's one of the businesses where the product quality keeps going up, the features keep going up, and the prices keep coming down. You probably know this famous joke between Bill Gates and Henry Ford, right? If they meet somewhere and Bill Gates is very proud of what he's done, so he said, if you were to reduce the prices of your cars, or you were able to do the kind of innovation we've done in the IT field, then a car would today cost $100. Might travel 500 kilometers to a liter, and would have features that you could probably send an email from the car and that will apply. And Henry Ford's answer is, being contemporary at that time, he says, yeah, but it won't crash every 3 miles, like all the IT systems do. But it's definitely an area which is obsolescence. If I may ask you just to give you an example of this business, which do you think is the largest brand today in cameras? You got it right. So, in 10 years, the business of camera has changed completely, right? It used to be Kodak, I remember, some time ago, and all that is gone. So, that's the speed of change in this business, and you've got to be careful. At this point of time, this company I'm talking of year 2005 had 150 employees and only a 10 crore turnover, and had 1 crore net profit. So, they're about 10%, which is not too bad for this kind of business. Competition within the Indian manufacturing, there were other plants also making the same product. Philips, Siemens, and 4 local players, and their position was number 4 among these players. There were about 26 people making it. And And the global competition, of course, besides these two who also are based in India, you have people like Panasonic and 8 other global brands. At that point of time, I think the average sales of any of those companies was $500 million. That's the sort of the landscape that this company had at that point of time. Any questions, please interrupt me if you have any clarifications. Also, it's very important to understand because whoever was heading this company was also trying to look at the macroeconomic picture. He probably went to a very nice college like yours. And so he said, what is this whole industry about across the world? And he figured that this industry is not really small. It's 2.5 times the oil, petroleum, and mineral industry. Also 2.5 times the chemical industry. It's almost 2.5 times the entire food and beverage business. Twice as large as the transportation of electricity. It's definitely a very, very large industry. He also discovered that it was not only large, it was also growing at a fantastic pace. Where the world GDP was growing, as you see, of course, these are old slides, but gives you the same sort of, around 2005, you were looking at these slides. So 3% was the growth of the world GDP, it's the dream now, but electricity was growing at 7.5%. Compared to the other industries, the rate of growth was fairly impressive, while there were some who were also going to negative growth at this time. So not only was it the largest industry, it was also the fastest growing industry. So, okay, so obviously this entrepreneur feels that he's in the right business. He then said, okay, what is happening in India compared to the rest of the world, and let's look at that. The world's electronics to their own GDP ratio, average across the world was 3%. China was, of course, already far ahead at 10.5%. India was lagging behind at half the world average at 1.5%. Also, if you were to look at electronics vis-a-vis manufacturing, you see that the world was 17% of all that the world was manufacturing was electronics and computer others. In China, they had almost 1/3 of what they were manufacturing was electronics in 2005. India, unfortunately, was only at 10%. So clearly, the picture in front of him, is probably in front of you at the moment, is that it's a large industry. The macroeconomics are very strong. Demand will continue to grow. He also knows from the first slide for his own company, he knows the challenges he faces, the competition he faces. And this also tells us that there is a lot of scope for manufacturing in India. Okay. Then he also went to one of the CIA seminars where some smart guy gave him some picture about what they were planning to do in India. He said, we are say the 17th largest in the world in terms of electronics, but we have launched this mission 5x5, which basically means that in 5 years we will be the 5th largest electronic manufacturer, the world electronic hardware manufacturer, after China, US, Japan, and Korea. That is something that the industry has now taken on a mission on itself. So the electronic hardware, they said, okay, we must at least meet 40% of the total demand of electronic hardware in the country, which worked out to some figures. Needless to say, he tried to derive from it what did it mean for his industry, and what meant was that even if they wanted to meet 50% of the demand of components for local production, it meant that there was a scope to grow 10 times in the next 4 years. That's the kind of demand that the seminar or this association told me. So now he's getting the building blocks for what he needs to do next, and getting quite ready and quite clear in his mind. But then he hits the roadblock. And he says, okay, all this is great, this board says, no. That's fine. What I presented you is the demand side. And the story very clearly is that the demand is huge. You can grow at whatever rate you like. There is enough to be done. Then he said, let me look at the supply side. How competitive am I as a company? Forget me as a company. Let's look at some figures of cost as a business which should normally do. He says, if I want to sell my capacitor or my component, okay. If I go to sell it to somebody in India, and let's assume that it sells for 100 rupees, whatever the product is. Even if this guy takes Afco, buys it from China, and let's say this customer lives here somewhere in Gurgaon in a factory, he talks to the Indian manufacturer and says, I'm willing to buy it from you as long as the price is the same. He says, okay, let me try and do that. A little bit of taxation, but for any transaction in this country, you have to have a central sales tax, which at that point of time is 2%, it used to be 4% in 2005. So he looked at the slide and he said, to be able to get to the same figure as China will be supplying to the same customer. I need to take 2 rupees off, 2% off, let's say. And I need to sell it somewhere at 98 to be able to meet target. It's a funny kind of trade economics where your local manufacturing is more expensive than the foreign item, but that's okay. This is a fantastic item to produce because, as you notice, the raw material content of this whole business is just about 48 or let's say 50%. So he has scope to value add by about 50%. Now for a manufacturer or for a businessman, I think that's a fantastic situation to be in because I still have 50% room to do value addition, whether it's in terms of skills, manpower, design, technology, marketing, branding, whatever you call it. So that gives me ample room and that's an interesting area to be in. So let's assume this guy said that I'm very smart and I will buy my raw material exactly at the same rate that the Chinese buy. So because that is something he said, I'm smart, I will get there. Which was, would you agree that he was being very optimistic? By saying that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because as you saw from the figures, China was making much more than India was making. So if you were sourcing raw materials either within India or from China, your cost of raw material is going to be very, very high. But anyway, this guy said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. However, I discovered that there is also the CST on the raw material supply, which adds some impact to it, and let's say that was 0.48. So even if he was smart enough as the Chinese buyers, in terms of raw material, there was some element that he was going to give up. But okay, you put that as okay. There is a problem here.
So, should in this case, that 48 should be added on the other side, 46? Because here, earlier case, the bargaining power was with the buyers. Here, it is we are the buyers. So.
No, he's not the buyer. This is the Indian seller, this is the Chinese seller. They're both selling to an Indian customer.
By buying the raw materials,
yeah.
He can get it from an Indian.
Yeah.
So he has the bargaining power.
Yeah. Only because he buys it in India, he has to pay the sales tax. If he imports it, he doesn't have to. So the same rules that apply here. For local sales, there is a sales tax, central sales tax. But for imported sales, there is no central sales tax. Yeah. There are taxes on imports, which are countervailing, as you might learn, with those of the locals. So I'm not talking about those taxes. If you pay an excise duty for local manufacturing, if you import the same item, you pay something called countervailing duty, which is exactly the same percentage. So what is common in both? I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about things that are not common. So his cost is actually going up. This is the Indian manufacturer's cost is going up. Then you came to raw material. The support, and I would say basically let's call it logistics, not just raw material, but also finished goods. And he figured that in China, this guy was trying to get some wires from China, and he figured that when he gets wires all the way from Shanghai, from a factory, 300 miles from Shanghai, from the factory X works, the supplier puts it onto a ship in Shanghai or a truck or something, and the ship sails to Mumbai, comes to Mumbai port. It takes exactly 21 days plus minus 1 day. It can be 1 day late or 1 day early. Cost him 4 rupees a kilo. That's all. When he picks up this consignment from Mumbai and puts it on a truck and brings it to his factory in Gurgaon or Noida or wherever he is, it costs him 14 rupees a kilo. So he saw these realities and he said, let me put a figure to it. And the cost of logistics, I'm going to